White House Communications Director Hope Hicks is resigning. We'll have more and so much more in our opening monologue, breaking news monologue tonight. All right, a ton of breaking news tonight. I promise we'll get it all in. It's a lot. We start with this. President Trump is slamming the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, for relying on an Obama-appointed Inspector General to probe the massive FISA abuse scandal, and not DOJ lawyers who actually have real prosecutorial power. Now, the president tweeted earlier today, quote, "Why is Attorney General Jeff Sessions asking the Inspector General to investigate potentially massive FISA abuse?" Well, we'll have some insight and clues into what they're thinking. And also tonight, the clock is ticking for top-ranking Obama administration officials to respond to Congressman Devin Nunes's 10 questions about the Clinton bought and paid for dossier. All of that, and Ed Henry has the latest on the breaking news about the White House Communications Director, Hope Hicks, is resigning. We'll have more and so much more in our opening monologue, breaking news monologue tonight. All right, a ton of breaking news tonight. I promise we'll get it all in. It's a lot. We start with this. President Trump is slamming the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, for relying on an Obama-appointed Inspector General to probe the massive FISA abuse scandal, and not DOJ lawyers who actually have real prosecutorial power. Now, the president tweeted earlier today, quote, "Why is Attorney General Jeff Sessions asking the Inspector General to investigate potentially massive FISA abuse?" Well, will take forever, has no prosecutorial power, and already late with reports on Comey, etc. Isn't the IG an Obama guy? Why not use the Justice Department lawyers? And he writes, disgraceful. Then the Attorney General, well, he responded. He put out a statement. It reads, quote, "We have initiated the appropriate process that will ensure complaints against this department will be fully and fairly acted upon if necessary. As long as I'm the Attorney General, I will continue to discharge my duties with integrity and honor, and this department will continue to do its work in a fair and impartial manner according to the law and the Constitution." In this case, I believe the president's right. Now, we know from two Republican memos and the Schiff memo, the Democratic memo, that the Clinton bought and paid for dossier, filled with Russian government lies and propaganda, was used to spy on the Trump campaign. We know that. We also know for a fact the FBI and DOJ lied to a FISA judge about Clinton and the DNC financing the dossier. And these memos show us that this FISA application, it never mentioned Hillary or the DNC that she controlled. They never told the FISA judges. Now, that is called maliciously lying and purposely deceiving FISA court judges and justices. And here's what's worse. The FBI and the DOJ, they did it 4 separate times. One for the original warrant to spy on Carter Page, and then that warrant was renewed on 3 separate occasions. Now, we have also discovered that, yes, the Trump campaign was in fact spied on, and here's why. When the FBI got approval for that FISA warrant using her bought and paid for dossier, it also gave them access to every one of Carter Page's old emails. That means old text messages. That means old phone calls. Everything, which dates back to when he was a member of the Trump campaign. And then it gets worse. Remember, Politico reported that the former top White House advisor, Steve Bannon, he may have even been picked up on FBI surveillance of Page. Now, this is about immediate accountability. This is about the rule of law. If you did this at home, I promise you would be investigated and probably be on trial by now. And government officials, in the end, I predict, are going to go to jail over this. So it is time, knowing the facts as we have them, which are incontrovertible and overwhelming, that the Attorney General has to do his job, serve the American people, and yes, the rule of law and the Constitution. And Jeff Sessions, if he's not up to the task, if he wants to create a 2-tier justice system, well, we have other options. How about just appoint a special counsel? Because that's other breaking news tonight. And all brand new Republican congressmen, they are demanding that Jeff Sessions do that very thing. Appoint a special counsel to investigate what is massive and widening FISA abuse scandals. These lawmakers also want the special counsel to probe the corrupt Clinton email investigation. Remember, the fix was in. They were writing the exoneration before investigation and how the Trump-Russia investigation even started. Now, we just explained all the key details about Obama-era FISA abuses. Now, here's what we know about the so-called Clinton email investigation. We know the fix was in from the beginning. We know it was predetermined. Hillary was not going to be charged, even those that she had on her email server, which was unsecure in a mom-and-pop bathroom closet. And she deleted emails, acid wash, smashing BlackBerries with a hammer. All of that They're all major crimes. They would send every one of you to jail out there, everyone, of course, not named Hillary Clinton, for a long time. It never happened. Why not? Now, James Comey, Trump-hating FBI agent Peter Strzok, other top FBI officials, they started writing the exoneration, gave her the get-out-of-jail-free card before doing their investigative work. And then there's, of course, the issue of how the Trump-Russia probe started. Here's the information we currently have. The Trump-hating FBI agent Peter Strzok, who was a top counterintelligence official, signed the paperwork that actually kicked off this entire Russia witch hunt. Strzok, his FBI girlfriend, mistress, and biased partisan Lisa Page, they're as corrupt as they come. And they talked about an insurance policy with who we think is the former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe. Remember that? Insurance policy. Insurance policy in case of what? Donald Trump winning, the American people deciding they want him as their president? We also have new at this hour. Hillary Clinton has zero shame. She is actually pretending tonight to be outraged. She's feigning outrage and is accusing President Trump of surrendering to the Russians. And she lashed out earlier today in a tweet writing, quote, "I say this as a former Secretary of State and as an American. The Russians are still coming. Our intelligence professionals are imploring Trump to act. Will he continue to ignore surrender or protect our country?" Okay, Obama knew in 2014 this was going to happen in 2016. He did nothing. And Hillary, you couldn't be a bigger hypocrite or a more partisan hack. Do you really have the audacity to lecture anybody on Russia? Did you forget that your failed reset button that you handed over to your counterpart? Or Uranium One, giving 20% of America's uranium to the hostile regime of Russia, the hostile actor Vladimir Putin? Or maybe it was because you and Bill, you doubled his speaking fees in Moscow? And then $145 million flowing right back into your foundation, the people involved in that deal? Or about how you supported Barack Obama, who did absolutely nothing, even though he was warned again and again that he had to stop Russia election interference? Oh, and Hillary, there's also the dossier and the evidence of real Russia collusion in the campaign of 2016, and how you and the DNC that you controlled forked over $12 million for Russian lies, to lie to the American people about to go into the ballot box on the eve of an election. Really? Just a little bit of free advice, Hillary. When it comes to Russia, maybe you just want to keep your right to remain silent. And also tonight, we have even more breaking news. It involves a very big question, and here it is. Okay, how do 4 FISA judges that we now know tonight were lied to by the FBI as it relates to the Clinton dossier, how do these judges feel about being lied to? Well, tonight we have new information to help answer that very question. Sarah Carter reporting that Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court presiding judge, her name is Rosemary Collyer, she told Congressman Devin Nunes and Congressman Bob Goodlatte in a February 18th letter that documents they are requesting from the FISA court can actually be obtained from the DOJ with the approval from the White House. Now, in her letter, this is where it gets interesting. She writes that requests for FISA court information related to the approval of a FISA warrant to spy on Carter Page, quote, present novel and significant questions. Novel, significant, meaning new, never happened before. Significant, yeah, this is pretty profound. And the judge adds that the court does not have any problem with the executive branch releasing any material from the FISA court to Congress. Here's my takeaway. Sounds like this one judge and probably the other 3 are now saying, we know pretty darn well we were lied to, we were manipulated, but we have to now go through the proper process to get the truth out. Now, that is a major development. We'll be following this story very, very closely. Also brand new tonight, that clock is ticking for the Obama administration, those officials, to answer Congressman Devin Nunes' 10 questions about the dossier. The deadline for the House Intelligence Committee, the chairman said, is Friday at midnight. And what Devin Nunes is trying to find out is what these Obama officials knew, when did they know it in regards to this phony dossier? Now, we know that the Obama FBI, DOJ, State Department, members of Congress all either had the dossier or were briefed on this phony dossier. What Nunes rightly is seeking are answers to how these officials found out about the dossier, who told them about it, and then what they did with that information. Now, the Wall Street Journal, their editorial board, they're raising some very important, serious questions and making key points about the dossier. For example, the editorial board points out that if Hillary Clinton and the DNC, they're paying the $12 million for the dossier with Russian-sourced lies, then Fusion GPS would have almost certainly shown them what their money bought. Now, former Senate Minority Leader Harry Reid also referenced what was in the dossier. Remember this point? He sent that letter to James Comey at the end of October 2016. This was only days before the election. Clearly, the dossier was not some closely held secret in terms of officials all across the Obama administration obviously knew about it. Harry Reid knew about it. So it's now time for all of them to respond and tell us, we, the American people, what did they know and when did they know it? This dossier scandal stretches well outside of the Obama administration, and 20 months after Christopher Steele gave this phony fake news dossier to the FBI, believe it or not, we now have evidence that so many liberals 2 years later are still trying to prove it's true. Russian hookers, Ritz-Carlton, Moscow urinating on bed. They are that desperate. The Washington Times has put together a full list, Rowan Scarborough, of all the liberal players in this scandal that are actually hoping they can verify anything in this Clinton bought and paid for dossier. Here's a couple of examples. BuzzFeed, remember they published the dossier. They're being sued for libel. They hired a retired FBI cyber expert to try and corroborate these lies. Fusion GPS, also being sued for libel, is also trying to still verify the dossier. Former British spy Christopher Steele, he's locked in a huge legal battle. His lawyers are reportedly, they're trying to confirm what he wrote in his own dossier, his own fake dossier. Now, verifying the dossier is what BuzzFeed, Fusion GPS, Steele should have actually done in the first place, not to manipulate the American people just a couple of months before the election. They never bothered to verify it because to them it didn't matter. It was always about smearing then candidate, now President Donald Trump. Now, finally tonight, a major report from the Daily Caller. This is interesting, and we're going to follow this very, very closely as it relates to James Comey's very questionable leadership at the FBI. And the Daily Caller is reporting, quote, the Department of Justice's Inspector General sanctioned at least 14 FBI agents and officials for a range of improper sexual acts since 2014. And most of the conduct, yes, it occurred during former FBI Director Comey's term. And here's what's most troubling. The Daily Caller reports that the DOJ Inspector General, we're waiting any day now, Michael Horowitz, found that Comey actually attempted to interfere with the investigation. We reached out to James Comey for comment. Shockingly, he never got back to us. I bet he's probably watching. This is just another example of how corrupt James Comey really is. He's a national embarrassment. He's a disgrace to law enforcement. He deserved to be fired, and we will follow this closely. I can't wait for this book to come out because he's so sanctimonious on Twitter, TikTok. Here with reaction, Fox News contributor Sarah Carter, civil rights criminal defense attorney David Schoen is with us, Fox News legal analyst Greg Jarrett. Sarah, let's start with you. You got into the story today. Let's give as many details as we can to our audience.
Well, I think what's fascinating here is that Judge Collier did respond back to Chairman Nunes and Chairman Goodlatte to their request for the transcripts from the FISA court when the FBI actually made the application to spy on Carter Page. And what she said was significant because she said, Sean, the Department of Justice can easily give you the same documents that we have. This has never been requested before from the FISA court, Collier said. So this is a new thing for them. They have to review everything, decide whether or not they can hand over these documents. But she said that the court would not object to the fact that the Department of Justice could hand them over. Well, I confirmed tonight that Nunes and Goodlatte did request those documents from the Department of Justice, and the Department of Justice never responded to them.
Well, Greg, let's talk about all of that from a legal perspective.
Well, Collier has made it clear that they didn't transcribe or record any of the Q&A that occurred in the application for the warrant.
But the application exists. It's written.
But the applications exist. That is in the possession of the Department of Justice. And Congress has the legal authority to request that from DOJ. They should hand it over. Those that don't contain...
One quick question, not to interfere. Why is the judge saying, the FISA judge saying that the executive branch can release this?
There's a question of separation of powers as to whether or not the judiciary can hand this over, but clearly Congress has constitutional oversight over the executive branch. So it's easier if the executive branch, the Department of Justice, hands it over.
You agree that the president's right as it relates to Jeff Sessions?
100% right.
Why would he rely on the Inspector General? They have no prosecutorial authority.
Because Jeff Sessions is the Attorney General in name only, and he's not running the department. And I suspect he's being told, don't appoint a second special counsel. He's been asked 3 times since last July by Congress to appoint a second special counsel. He ignored the first 2. I suspect he didn't even see those requests. Then in November, he said, yeah, I'm thinking about it. Finally, yesterday, he hands it off to the Inspector General, who has no prosecutorial authority, can't compel witnesses, has complained that every time he tries to talk to the DOJ and the FBI, they stonewall him or provide documents heavily redacted. The only way you can get to the bottom of this is somebody who has grand jury subpoena power to compel testimony under oath. The IG doesn't have that.
What do you make, David Schoen, of what this judge is saying in this particular case? And very specifically, you know, that the considerations involve not only prerogatives of the legislative branch, but also the interests of the executive branch, including its responsibility for national security and need to maintain the integrity of any ongoing law enforcement investigation. What is she asking for there?
I think the court, Judge Collier is a very common sense judge, straightforward. I think what Judge Collier is saying is a couple of things. Remember, Sean, as you well know, and by the way, you and Sarah are doing a tremendous job getting on top of this story. This letter is only 2 weeks old. But what Judge Collier seems to be saying is 2 things at least. Look, openness and transparency are the hallmarks of our justice system. The FISA court is an exception, only since 1978. Judge Collier and every judge on that court cannot allow that court to be politicized, number one, and cannot allow that court to be a forum for either misleading evidence or the omission of critically important evidence in their decision-making process. Because as bad as that kind of thing is in our regular judicial process, in a secret court like FISA, where we don't see the light of day, we don't have public access to it, it's a much greater danger.
No, go ahead. You finish, sir. I'm sorry.
No, I'm just about finished. I mean, Judge Collier cannot allow that to happen. And she's saying, after all, the Justice Department, or the executive branch, made the application. We've told you, she said, for some time now, not just in this case, that you are not restricted in terms of turning this over to Congress.
This is new to me in the sense that, we can actually get the application before the American people. Sarah, let me go back to you. I'd like to see that application. I'd like to see the footnote that said it may have some political connection. But we know now, everybody knew Clinton bought and paid for it. We know that nobody verified it. And we know that they went to a FISA judge because they wanted all of that information, and they got what they wanted, spying on an opposition party candidate in the weeks leading up to an election and for an entire year thereafter. This is how do you say that? How do you lie to a FISA judge or any judge?
Well, you can't. And the American people deserve to see the facts. And this is why Judge Collier, she is a no-nonsense judge. She wants to make it very clear that they don't object to the fact that the DOJ can share these documents with the committee. And not only that, Sean, there is an essential Fourth Amendment issue at stake here. It is our rights under the Fourth Amendment. And they're saying if those rights were violated, this should be thoroughly investigated. So call a special counsel, call a prosecutor, but investigate this, because this really is the biggest story.
Greg.
Perjury, abuse of power, obstruction of justice, fraud, and conspiracy to commit fraud, and false and misleading statements. Those are 6 felony statutes that appear to have been violated by officials at the Department of Justice and the FBI. It demands a second special counsel to prosecute if the evidence is there.
Is this, David, the biggest abuse of power, corruption case you've seen in your lifetime? I certainly believe in mine.
We don't know yet. I mean, because all of the facts aren't in. It's very scary.
Let me just focus in on one thing. On the very specific issue, of purposely withholding information, lying to FISA court judge, lying by omission, whatever you want to say.
God forbid anyone should ever be able to get away with that. We don't have a country that operates with a secret court system with misleading evidence going to judges and the very sensitive work that this court does. Can you imagine Section 702 application with misleading evidence? The most, as Sarah has said.
They did it for power. They did it for power. And that's what makes this so corrupt. I got to let you all go. You've been amazing. Great work today, Sarah. Great analysis. You're writing a book on all this. We're going to update people soon. And David, thank you. All right, when we come back, the Mooch, Anthony Scaramucci, Geraldo Rivera, Ed Henry, a lot of other breaking news tonight. We'll get it all in, I promise. Stay with us. All right, big news tonight about a staffing change at the White House in terms of Communications Director Hope Hicks. She's stepping down. Here with the very latest, live from the White House, Fox News Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry. Ed, I will remind our audience, I was there when it was Hope and Corey Lewandowski. And the president, and that was pretty much the team in the beginning. And I know the media has been unmerciful to her, but I watched up close how hard she worked and did an amazing job.
That's right, Sean, and what you're mentioning as well is harkening back to the campaign. She has been deeply loyal to this president, has been there from the beginning, a really remarkable climb from someone who was quite young, but at the age of just about 29 years old, became very influential around here. In fact, we're being told that after this story broke late this afternoon, Hope Hicks was seen crying, as were others on the communications team, a sign of how well liked she is around the West Wing, but also how abrupt and unexpected this was. She was critical to the president getting that tax cut through, leading the messaging for that. It's one reason why the president put out a glowing statement praising her 3 years at his side, dating back to that campaign. Remember, though, there's been controversy recently. Hicks received negative publicity when her boyfriend at the time, White House aide Rob Porter, left after hard.
She worked and did an amazing job.
That's right, Sean, and what you're mentioning as well is harkening back to the campaign. She has been deeply loyal to this president, has been there from the beginning, a really remarkable climb from someone who was quite young, but at the age of just about 29 years old, became very influential around here. In fact, we're being told that after this story broke late this afternoon, Hope Hicks was seen crying, as were others on the communications team, a sign of how well liked she is around the West Wing, but also how abrupt and unexpected this was. She was critical to the president getting that tax cut through, leading the messaging for that. It's one reason why the president put out a glowing statement praising her 3 years at his side, dating back to that campaign. Remember, though, there's been controversy recently. Hicks received negative publicity when her boyfriend at the time, White House aide Rob Porter, left after accusations he had abused 2 ex-wives. Then yesterday, Hicks spent several hours, 9 in fact, testifying behind closed doors to the House Intelligence Committee about Russia, and took heat today after it was revealed she told lawmakers she has told white lies for the president, though there's at least one Republican lawmaker tonight saying that's such a minor thing that this whole House Russia probe should be shut down. Nonetheless, top advisors tell me this exit has nothing to do with yesterday's intelligence testimony, and that Hicks had recently signaled she'd be leaving soon. And then, in fact, what's going on is that Chief of Staff John Kelly is trying a bit behind the scenes to consolidate power, even though Kelly did put out a statement declaring Hicks. The president put out a glowing statement praising her 3 years at his side, dating back to that campaign. Remember, though, there's been controversy recently. Hicks received negative publicity when her boyfriend at the time, White House aide Rob Porter, left after accusations he had abused 2 ex-wives. Then yesterday, Hicks spent several hours, 9 in fact, testifying behind closed doors to the House Intelligence Committee about Russia, and took heat today after it was revealed she told lawmakers she has told white lies for the president, though there's at least one Republican lawmaker tonight saying that's such a minor thing that this whole House Russia probe should be shut down. Nonetheless, top advisors tell me this exit has nothing to do with yesterday's intelligence testimony, and that Hicks had recently signaled she'd be leaving soon. And then, in fact, what's going on is that Chief of Staff John Kelly is trying a bit behind the scenes to consolidate power, even though Kelly did put out a statement declaring Hicks has served her country with, quote, great distinction. This comes amid indications that Kelly may also be trying to ease out senior advisor and presidential son-in-law Jared Kushner after a series of leaks about his security clearance problems. In fact, Bloomberg has a breaking news story tonight suggesting that more than 30 White House aides, lost their top secret clearances, Sean.
All right, Ed Henry at the White House tonight. As always, Ed, we appreciate it.
Good to see you.
Joining us now, former White House Communications Director, founder, managing partner of Skybridge Capital, Anthony the Mooch Scaramucci, and Fox News correspondent at large, Geraldo Rivera. You know what? The media is so, they were so cruel to her as it relates to
how it works.
She's dating somebody.
Yeah.
It's none of their business, number one. And then, you know, oh, she admits she told a white lie. To me, this is what a white lie is. The president would love to do the interview. He's just, it's a nice way of saying no. Or you look great when you don't think the person looks great.
Tell me a person in the world that hasn't told a white lie, and I'll identify the biggest liar in the room, Sean. So that's a ridiculous statement. The real thing about this,
and the media lies every day.
Well, yeah, but they like rolling people like Hope in broken glass to see if she'll break. Okay, and she's made out of steel, so obviously she won't break. She's a wonderful person. I'll tell you, she's one of the least malicious people I've ever met in my life. She's dedicated. She's charming. She's thoughtful. And at the end of the day, she's going to have an unbelievable career, Sean.
You know? She's already, 29, had an unbelievable career.
Hope, if you're watching, my agent has called me and said, please let me represent Hope Hicks. I said, I don't know, I'll give her a call.
She can work at the Fox News channel.
Yeah,
She's good.
Anything you want, Hope. I just put it to you that way. He's an all-star Hollywood agent. But my point is that this woman is an entrepreneur above everything else. You're an entrepreneur, as you know. You built this from nothing. Look at what the president did, starting with her and Corey Lewandowski and his children to where he is today. So she deserves all the respect and love and support and kindness that you can imagine.
You know, Geraldo, I saw it from the beginning. I was there, and it was her, and it was Corey, and it was 7 days a week, and it was. Look, President Trump will wear out a lot of people, and she hung the whole time, was there the whole time. And what's so unbelievable to me, Geraldo, did you ever, like, you don't want to tell somebody we're never giving you the interview? Well, we'll try. Isn't that what a white lie is? And the media's blown that up into something that it never was, or getting into her personal life, and cameras are following her to her apartment or a taxi cab. It's pretty despicable how they've treated her.
Oh, they cut her up. They cut her up like muggers, Sean. Nobody is indispensable in the White House except for the president, with the possible exception of the Chief of Staff, John Kelly, General John Kelly. But Hope Hicks comes as close as they come. She was a trusted, loyal friend. You and I know about loyalty. We know about friendship. We know about trust. The president could trust her. He's trusted her for 3 years. She has taken this from the candidate, the long shot candidate, the buckaroo, the wild maverick, helped mold him into the candidate that he became to win the presidency. And then in the first year in office, she has been a key aide. She has been by his side. But she has been whittled down. She's been worn down. And I think the House Intelligence Committee and how they dealt with her and how they slandered her, that coming on the heels. Mooch mentioned the whole Rob Porter thing. She's had a lot. She helped draft that statement on Air Force One about the Donald Trump Jr. meeting at Trump Tower. She's gone through a lot. She's very young. She's been very effective. She's been very loyal. She would be sorely missed. I lament this. This is bad news. Mercedes Schlapp, we know her. She was with Fox News for many years. She's the White House Director of Strategic Communications. She would be a replacement that I could endorse, but I think there's no doubt that Hope Hicks will be missed, Sean.
Anthony, I agree in the sense that she'll be missed.
Yeah.
Geraldo's also right. It's the president.
Well, I would say Vice President Pence is way more indispensable than, say, Chief of Staff Kelly. I mean, that's just my opinion. But the other thing is these guys should start appointing people like Rick Grinnell and start doing the job.
Well, I don't get to hold up across the board, by the way. I agree with you on Grinnell.
I mean, Grinnell, this is the German country, the third, fourth largest economy. Why don't we have an ambassador there? So there's a lot of nonsense going on.
All right, I think we send Geraldo. What do you think?
Yep. Geraldo, no, I got another ambassadorship for Geraldo. I'm going to send you where Reince Priebus wanted to send me, Antarctica, Geraldo, okay? You can develop a relationship with the Penguins, okay? That's where
Spanish Harlem.
That's where Priebus wanted to send me, okay? But so far we're doing okay with the Penguins.
Listen, I think Geraldo would do good in Antarctica or anywhere he was. He'd find a way, to have a police siren behind him as he reports. I know him. All right. Love you both. Thank you.
Puerto Ricans don't do well in Antarctica.
All right, but Hope's going to do great, man.
No, but I think the thing about Hope Hicks, we can't overlook the fact that she was remarkable for her age. She was a steady presence. She was, and I don't know, I can't speak for other reporters, but she was my lifeline to the president. When I needed to speak to the president or I wanted to be with the president, like the Mar-a-Lago meeting just a week and a half ago.
She was everyone's lifeline. She talked to everybody.
She was everyone's lifeline.
The president would actually say,
I hope the president can.
There's hope with 4 phones, and that's how she operated, which was an amazing testament to her. Media is so corrupt and abusive to so many women in this administration, and we'll call them out on it. Good to see you. Welcome back. All right, when we come back, the gun control debate is heating up. When I come back, I'm going to explain to you in a mini monologue why guns and more of them are the answer, not the problem. Michelle Malkin, straight ahead. All right, so the president held a bipartisan meeting at the White House today to discuss school safety. Now, this, of course, in the wake of the horrific mass shooting at Stoneman Douglas High. Well, many Democrats, they used the meeting, predictably, to push for increased gun control, expanded background checks, limits on the Second Amendment. Now, tonight, so I want to address this topic head on and focus on what I've been telling you, real solutions that will actually protect our schools without giving away our rights to keep and bear arms, to law-abiding Americans. Guns are not the problem, but they can be a part of the solution. And that's tonight's mini monologue. So the president started today's meeting by highlighting such a very important point, so often overlooked, about mass shootings. Watch this.
98% of all mass public shootings in the United States since 1950 have taken place in gun-free zones. It's terrible. You've got to have defense, too. You can't just be sitting ducks. And that's exactly what we've allowed people in these buildings and schools to be.
President's so right. You know, the vast majority of these mass shootings occur inside of soft targets. This was true on February the 14th. You know, no gun-free zones, they call them. Like most schools in America, Stoneman Douglas is a gun-free zone with the one armed resource officer on duty who clearly was not up to the task of really defending students and teachers from an armed lunatic. I've said this over and over again. Utilize highly trained, armed, former military personnel, police officers, conceal carry, guard our schools, complete thorough threat assessments, and literally provide the kids with what? IDs, when in trouble or when in doubt, use metal detectors. But we need the people on the ground to provide a quick, effective response to any threat that might arise. Put one retired military police guy on every floor. We have armed personnel at the U.S. Capitol. We have them at the White House. We have them at airports. We have them at banks. We have them at jewelry stores. We have them at sports stadiums. Almost every commercial building here in New York City. And by the way, you think the Oscars, the Academy Awards, Sunday night is going to be a gun-free zone? I doubt it. So why should our school children not have the same protection? And unfortunately, instead of addressing this problem and protecting our kids, you got many feigning outrage, predictable comments by all the lawmakers. They want a big government bureaucratic response that would also step on your rights to keep and bear arms.
There is no other issue out there in the American public today like background checks. 97% of Americans want universal background checks.
And so just doing something on this background check issue and using that as a base, and then I would like to add some of these other things we've talked about, I think would make a major difference.
I have a bipartisan bill to remove the so-called Dickey Amendment, which has prevented over the last couple of decades the CDC and other federal agencies from researching gun violence.
We can do universal background checks and ban bump stocks and increase the age to 21 and get rid of the Dickey Amendment.
Maybe these Democrats have already forgotten the complete and utter failure of the bureaucracy. In this case, the FBI, the disaster that is the Broward County Sheriff's Department, they received dozens of prior warnings about the Stoneman Douglas shooter. Nothing happened. People heard something, said something, and they never stopped this guy. Bureaucracy is not the solution. Taking away people's Second Amendment rights, not the solution, when, sadly, they weren't pushing big government solutions. The Democrats at today's meeting were proposing limits on the Second Amendment. Don't believe me? Listen to them in their own words.
What I've watched and seen is the development of weapons that I never thought would leave the battlefield, that are out on our streets. And the latest and newest, Mr. Chairman, is the AR-15. What do we do about weapons of war easily accessible on our streets?
The majority of people in this country now understand that there are limitations on the Second Amendment. You cannot own an automatic weapon. You cannot own a bazooka. And so there is no reason to continue to sell to people a weapon of war like this.
Let me be clear. Allowing the federal government to place limits on a right to self-defense from threats, foreign and domestic, is not going to result in a safer society. And moreover, it does nothing to increase school security, does nothing to protect our kids from deranged criminals who do not care about the law. I have no doubt the Democrats' pro-government, anti-gun arguments were well-intentioned. I don't question their intentions. They, I assume, want Americans to be safe. But I have a warning. You know, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Here now is someone who's calling on the Broward County Sheriff's Office to release the footage of their response during the Stoneman Douglas shooting. She is the host of Michelle Malkin Investigates, CRTV. Michelle Malkin. You know, I've never heard, we saw on 9/11, cops going up, EMT, firefighters going up when they knew what could potentially befall them as everyone else is racing down. I never in my life heard of one cop that in a situation like that stayed outside. But to have 4 tells me this had to be protocol. That's my belief. Thoughts?
Yes, and that's why I think releasing that video of the exterior cameras is so important. There are 3 media outlets that are now filing lawsuit under the Open Records Act in Florida, and I absolutely support their efforts to dislodge the video that the sheriff's office and the school superintendent in the district there want to keep secret. They are hiding behind broad, overbroad exemptions for public disclosure because they don't really care about public safety. That's clear from their action, or rather their inaction. What they care is about preserving their own reputations and their jobs. So some of the excuses, Sean, that they're giving for wanting to keep this hidden in a black box, these videos, are that, well, it would endanger the school security plan. Well, they're already going to demolish Building 12 where those cameras were fixed. So that's a specious argument. They're also saying that there's an open internal affairs investigation and an active criminal investigation. Well, it was Broward coward Sheriff Israel who disclosed what was on those videos, or so he claims, in the first place. He said, quote, "This is information that people need to know. Then why should we trust him, given his fecklessness and his grandstanding ever since the massacre? Why should we trust him to describe what's on the video when we know that he threw this deputy, Scott Peterson, under the bus, and Scott Peterson has given public statements disputing what Sheriff Israel has said?" This should be released tomorrow,
Michelle,
because it is in the public interest.
39 times they went to this kid's house. He couldn't bring a backpack to school. 2 specific FBI warnings and a screenshot. He wants to be a professional school shooter.
Yes.
Is there anything else we need before we start talking about taking away people's Second Amendment rights? And if we had security, armed security, retired military police, I would prefer them there if I'm in a building that has an active shooter.
Yes, a couple of points. I'm in Colorado, of course, and we have experienced several of these massacres.
Yeah.
Columbine, the Aurora Theater, and I've got a high school senior who has a campus where there are armed guards. And after Newtown, I interviewed and highlighted the example of volunteer veterans and retired law enforcement officers, exactly what you talked about in your mini monologue, Sean, who are part of a sheriff's posse in places like Custer County. These are people who are professional, who are trained, and who care about the kids in their backyard. And this raises, I think, one of the most fundamental and basic points. Change starts in your backyard. There is something rotten in Broward County, in both the sheriff's office and the school district. I highlighted it on my blog. A state grand jury report from several years ago that talks about, quote, the culture of misfeasance, malfeasance,
we had a
and
report last
nonfeasance.
night. 66. I've got to run because of the constraints of time, but let me say this. We can even have these people do this for free. Retired military police, you know how you do it? No state, no income tax if you contribute 15, 20 hours a week. None. You don't pay any taxes at all. How about that? That will hardly be noticed. All right, Michelle, thank you. When we come back, Hillary Clinton's hypocritical Russian feigned outrage. Really? Dr. Gorka, Larry Elder next. All right, earlier today, Hillary Clinton had the audacity to accuse President Trump of ignoring the cybersecurity threat posed by Russia. Okay, the twice failed presidential candidate warning, quote, the Russians are still coming. Here's the reaction. Fox News national security strategist Sebastian Gorka, nationally syndicated radio talk show host Larry Elder. Dr. Gorka, where do I begin? The dossier, Uranium One, or the reset?
Look, you have to laugh because otherwise you get really, really angry. There is no other Secretary of State that this nation has ever had since 1776 that has done more damage to this country, from Uranium One to FISA-gate to the fact that she had a server that was illegal, that had TSSCI, SAP, classified information on it, that U.S. officials have said is absolutely hackable by nation states, including Russia. I really, really think that this woman needs to get off social media, get off Twitter, and find a lawyer who's better than the lawyer she used to buy that Russian propaganda to get that illegal surveillance warrant against Carter Page.
Larry?
Well, John, as between Russian meddling and the corrosive effect of our left-wing media, the left-wing media has a lot more to answer to. There was an experiment done by a professor named Tim Grosclose who wrote a book called Left Turn. He wanted to find out what kind of effect the left-wing media had on how people think, how people reason, and more importantly, how people vote. So people who never got the Washington Times, the conservative newspaper, were offered free subscription to the Washington Post, the liberal newspaper, and vice versa. Those that had the liberal newspaper were offered free subscription to the conservative newspaper, and let's find out how this affects how people vote. And in both cases, people shifted. The people that got the liberal newspaper started voting somewhat more liberally. The people that got the Washington Times, the conservative newspaper, started voting a lot more conservatively. He concluded that if people really got their news in a fair and balanced way, half liberal, half conservative, the average state would vote the way Texas does, which is 8 to 10 points in favor of Republican. That is the corrosive effect of our left-wing media, far more damaging than any kind of Russian meddling. And remember, in the indictment of the 13 Russians, the conclusion was the meddling had no effect on our electorate. Imagine the effect of our electorate, of our left-wing media. Far more corrosive, far more powerful, far more damaging.
Well, that's such a good point. Dr. Gorka, respond to that. Because when you think of all that they ignore, it is so profound, and how they cover for their ideology, and it's so pervasive.
Just look at the last 13 months, Sean. What has this president done with regards to Russia? He's alleged to be in the pocket of Vladimir Putin, but what has he done? With the unleashing of oil production in Anwar, the XL pipeline, the fracking, he's destroying Russia's stranglehold on gas and oil. With NATO finally, after 30 years, saying, okay, we're going to pay for our own defense and meet those 2% GDP targets, he's brought the alliance back together. And by saying we're going to arm the Ukrainians, he's doing the opposite of what Hillary and Obama did, who rolled over when Russia invaded the Ukraine.
Let me give Larry the final word.
And don't forget how they threw the Czech Republic and the Poles under the bus because the Russians did not like the defense deal that George W. Bush had negotiated. Let's not forget about all of those things that they've done. And Trump is considered to be too cozy to Putin. Give me a break.
Yeah, well said. Guys, right on target. Thank you both. When we come back, a video of the day you will love and a Hannity hotline that will entertain you. Straight ahead.